The story begins with a commoner boy opening his eyes and looking as tears of agony fall from his eyes. He looks around to see that some nobles are laughing at him. He can't help but wonder what's going on, but Prince tells him that he will grant his wish before taking his life. He asks the commoner boy to strike him with his best magic spell, and the boy does so. However, his spell is so weak that it hardly causes any damage to the prince. Seeing this, the nobles make fun of his weak magic, and the prince can't believe there's a commoner in his kingdom whose magic is so weak. He then shares the words of a great father of sorcery called William Bordeaux, who said the most important things for a mage are lineage, talent, and intelligence, and then informs him that magic will never smile upon someone as insignificant as him. He activates his powerful flame magic and sends it towards him, causing the flames to immediately consume the commoner boy's body. The boy screams in pain as the flames burn him to ashes, but then he immediately begins smiling at the magnificent magic of a noble. He wishes he learned more about magic and mastered it while he was alive. The next moment he wakes up, he sees himself surrounded by some maids holding toys. He looks at them and thinks they are giant enemies, but he looks at his hands and realizes they are quite tiny. With this, he accidentally casts a fire spell, which bursts through the roof of the castle as fireworks go off. Marking his birth, a town carrier runs through the kingdom, announcing the birth of the 7th Prince of the Kingdom of Salem while sharing posters with the people. While everyone is happy at the birth of Prince Lloyd, the maids at the castle are mind-blown by the fire spell created by the newborn baby. After a few years, some maids search for the prince in the castle and wonder where he is. The prince comes out of hiding after they leave and decides to sneak away from the castle, but he gets greeted by 2 men. Prince Lloyd shushes the man and tells him to deny seeing him, and the man agrees to keep his secret. He asks Lloyd if he'll like to go hunting with them, but Lloyd leaves without saying anything. The man is disappointed that the prince has run off again, but his friend informs him that Lloyd is the 7th prince of this kingdom, which makes him out of the race for the crown. The man informs his friend that the prince is something else, as he was able to speak shortly after his birth, read spell books instead of children's picture books, and also refused breast milk like any gentleman would. He tells his friend that he thinks the prince is a reincarnation of the great sorcerer William Bordeaux. His friend laughs at him and tells him it's ridiculous to think the prince is a reincarnation of the great sorcerer or a reincarnated prince. He then runs down the steps in the castle, and he realizes the man is right about him being a reincarnation. He remembers he was a commoner boy in his past life and doesn't know much about magic, but wonders why his memories are still with him in this world. As the maids look for him in the castle, he wonders why he was reborn as someone privileged to be the 7th son of a royal family. Despite being born into royalty, he doesn't plan to follow their ambitions for glory. He decides to stick to his ambitions from his past life and wishes to learn about magic. He enters the royal library, and he's amazed by the library's collection because it surpasses that of the Magic Academy in his past life. He takes a book and opens it up, but someone immediately appears behind him. A girl named Sylpha takes the book from his hands and is mad after finding that he ran away from the maids. They then engage in swordplay, and Lloyd is able to hold his own against her for a while, but she eventually pushes him back. He tells her he does not have any intention to search for the throne since he's the 7th. Hence, he doesn't need sword instructions. Sylpha tells him there's more to life than succession to the throne, and he is a member of the royal family. He needs to know how to handle a sword. Lloyd realizes that Sylpha won't let him go until he defeats her. With this, our reincarnated prince decides to go into a serious mode, and Sylpha realizes that Lloyd is getting stronger with each passing day. Lloyd isn't bothered by her compliment because he knew she was holding back, but he reveals that he is also secretly using control-type magic to trace Sylpha's movements. He believes he is basically cheating, but he is doing this so he can get out of practice and go back to reading more magic books. They continue sparring. And Lloyd realizes that though he could copy her techniques, he is still at a disadvantage against her, which would make him lose. He decides to cheat and use his magic to increase his sword length and his physical strength. He re-engaged Sylpha, and this time he's able to keep up with her. He believes he'll be able to win with his magic, and our reincarnated Prince Lloyd decides to use his trump card to make an unexpected move. He shoots his trace magic, which mirrors Sylpha's movements, and he tries to strike her from behind. At first, Sylpha looks surprised, but then blocks his attack. She realizes that he is cheating and then knocks his sword out of his hands. She's surprised he thought she wouldn't notice his cheating skills. However, she's amazed he was able to use 2 spells at once, which most court magicians can't even manage. And she tells him not to rush his growth, but to grow at his own pace. However, Lloyd realizes she didn't notice his physical enhancement and his control spells, because he was actually using 4 magic spells at once. With this, he decides to keep this information secret from her so she doesn't rat him out. Sylpha takes him to the maid bath, but Lloyd protests, telling her he can bathe himself. Sylpha doesn't want to let him out of her sight because she believes she'll only find him under a pile of books. Lloyd is disappointed he doesn't get to read his book, but the other maids tell him the demon of the library will get him up if he remains stubborn. Lloyd is shocked that there's a library with a forbidden demon. The maids share the tale of the demon named Grimoire, who almost destroyed this kingdom a long time ago, and reveal that it took several sorcerers to seal the demon away in a book. Sylpha thinks the story is a fairy tale because she can't believe there's a book in the castle's underground library where the monster is sealed. Sylpha doesn't think Lloyd will be scared by such a tale, but she's surprised to see him trembling. The maids offer to sleep with him through the night, but Sylpha tells them she's the only one who can perform that role. As the argument between the maids begins, Lloyd uses that opportunity to sneak away, as the idea of a forbidden underground library in the castle makes his eyes sparkle with anticipation. Lloyd goes underground, uses an invisible spell to get through the guards guarding the entrance, and sneaks past them. While they argue about the authenticity of the tale, they believe no one will be able to sneak past them and break the seal cast by the 10 most powerful mages the kingdom has ever seen. Our reincarnated Prince Lloyd arrives at the seal, and he breaks it easily. He enters the library, and he can't believe he never knew such an exciting section existed underground in the castle. He moves through the library, checking out the books, and he reminds himself to put up the barrier when he's leaving. He settles down with a book when another book suddenly starts levitating, which surprises Lloyd. A demon emerges from the book, and he tells Lloyd he's impressed he was able to break the seal. Lloyd wonders who the demon is, and the demon introduces himself as Grimoire, and Lloyd realizes that he's the demon of the forbidden book. Grimoire tries to convince Lloyd to free him from the seal, and he offers to give him as much gold as he wants. But Lloyd isn't impressed with the demon's creation magic. He's disappointed. Lloyd just molded some dust into gold, and he crushes the gold back into dust easily, which surprises Grimoire. Lloyd tells him he plans to replace his seal because he doesn't want a demon to destroy his plans to learn the magic of this kingdom. Grimoire becomes desperate, and he offers to teach Lloyd some ancient magic that has been lost to time. This piques Lloyd's interest, and Grimoire tells him he will teach him because he can see he has a lot of magic talent. Lloyd remembers his past life in the words of the prince, who said magic would never smile on him because he's a commoner. He's now convinced he has a body more privileged in magic than a mere commoner. He decides to release the demon's seal, and the demon can't believe his luck as he breaks it with a spell. Lloyd tells the demon to teach him about the ancient magic, and the demon decides to keep his word. He immediately strikes Lloyd with an ancient flame magic. And he decides to move on with his escape, thinking he has taken Lloyd down. But he's surprised to see Lloyd is safe because he uses a barrier to protect himself. Lloyd is amazed at the spell cast by the demon, and he asks the demon to show him more. The demon is pissed by this, and he hits Lloyd with more powerful ancient magic spells. But none of them can penetrate through Lloyd's barrier. Lloyd is so fascinated by the magic that he decides to try it for himself. He takes the remnants from his barrier and holds them on his finger so he can observe their composition. He excitedly awaits what more Grimoire can offer when, suddenly, Grimoire grows a second face and starts chanting. Lloyd notices his double face and believes he will release a devastating ancient spell. But Grimoire does so, and our reincarnated Prince Lloyd analyzes the spell from within his barrier. But Grimoire can't believe Lloyd is still alive. After being hit with his most powerful spell, Grimoire decides to run for his life as he believes he is no match for him. But he's stopped by a barrier. Lloyd informs him that he put up a barrier so that he won't try to run away. Lloyd then decides to test Grimoire's defensive magic, and he casts a huge spell. Grimoire can't believe Lloyd has such a huge mana, and he tries to dodge the fire spell, but he's burnt to a crisp. Lloyd wonders why Grimoire wasn't able to dodge his attack, and Grimoire can't believe he's so arrogant. Lloyd then decides to repair the damage to the library, and Grimoire can't believe a kid was able to restore the room so perfectly. He decides to treat Lloyd with respect, surrender himself, and pledge his services to Lloyd. He asks to serve as Lloyd's familiar, and Lloyd immediately agrees. But Grimoire believes Lloyd sees him as a lab rat. Lloyd tells him he is very tall, and he asks him to transform into something smaller. Grimoire transforms into a little cute demon with the aim of buttering Lloyd up so he can take him down when he's unaware. Our reincarnated Prince Lloyd invites him to jump into his coat and decides to use the opportunity to attach himself to Lloyd and take over his body. But as soon as he touches Lloyd, he's surprised by how powerful Lloyd's mono is. He decides to be obedient to Lloyd because he can't see himself taking control of him. Sometime later, we watch as the noble prepares for his day and makes his way through the mansion. In the library, Grim warns Lloyd that someone is approaching. Lloyd tells him to hide, and we learn that this noble is Prince Albert. Albert gives a demonstration of his power and amazes everyone when he's able to hit a target perfectly with his magic. Albert is the second prince of the Salem Kingdom. He excels at everything, so much so that everyone believes he will be the one chosen to be the next king. Albert has permission to access facilities like this one, and sometimes he invites Lloyd to come along. Lloyd is not able to use much of his magic in the castle, so he appreciates it when Albert invites him to the range. Lloyd is up next to give a demonstration, but he's not interested in the throne. Therefore, he does not need to impress anyone. Besides that, if he showed his true power, he would be forced to get involved in the power struggle between the princes. Lloyd hates that idea, since all he wants to do is research sorcery and peace. Grim wonders what he will do about the demonstration, so Lloyd explains that he will simply make his fireball curve so that it only grazes the targets. Lloyd says it's so simple, but Grim thinks that takes even more skill than just hitting the targets. Lloyd fires away and just barely grazes each one. Spectators are disappointed about it, but Grim thinks about how they should have realized how impossibly difficult it is to control magic so accurately. The magic-loving Lloyd doesn't pay them any attention and just thinks about how he could improve his technique even more. Albert seems like he might know something, but he doesn't mention anything and just says that Lloyd can stay while he takes a break. Lloyd couldn't be any happier, as there are so many things he wants to try. Lloyd wants to start by trying the dual incantation that Grim did, but Grim frantically tells him that it's impossible. That is an ability unique to demons that can form extra miles. Lloyd thinks that he might have a solution. He surprises himself when his idea works, but Grim is shocked and points out that no sane person would ever try incorporating a demon into their own body. Well, that's exactly what Lloyd did, so he tells Grim to try to cast an infernal fireball. Grim declares that this will be a piece of cake for a demon of his caliber, but he freaks out when things don't go the way he planned. Grim is terrified and wonders what Lloyd did. Lloyd explains that it was just a spell stack, a technique for compressing incantations. By reciting several incantations at once, Lloyd is able to shorten the time to cast a spell. Lloyd has taken this to an extreme level, as he casually says that he was just reciting about 100 spells in each line of the incantation. Grim is stunned at how casual he is being and points out that even as a powerful demon, he can only stack 2 or 3 lines at once. Lloyd does his next test and finds that he can now talk out of both mouths. Grim panics as he fears that Lloyd is going to recite 2 advanced spells at once. But Lloyd just silences him. An immense power begins to flow through him as Lloyd uses the infernal fireball and waterball spells. Grim's panic reaches an all-time high as he realizes that Lloyd is weaving 2 incredibly advanced spells together. Demana is intensifying to incredible levels, and Lloyd can be more excited to see what kind of power dual incantation brings. Lloyd realizes that he can't release the power on the ground, so he simply sends it into the sky. This still results in a display of power that can be seen from far away in the castle. Some servants wish that Albert wouldn't spend his time with Lloyd, since Lloyd is just a kid and he isn't very good at magic. Albert tells them that they are just blind. He reveals that Lloyd was able to graze all the targets perfectly in the exact same way he did it on purpose, so Albert calls Lloyd a genius. Albert predicts that Lloyd could even become the Grand Sage and hopes that he will be his ally. The servants are sure that he will be able to convince him, but Albert points out that he just wants to get along with his little brother. Albert predicts that Lloyd has probably already knocked down all the targets, but the servants once again doubt Lloyd's ability. They think that knocking down the target so fast would be impossible for the kid, and the servant wonders why it's so dark outside. We see why, as Grim shakes in fear after seeing that Lloyd blew a hole right through the atmosphere. Lloyd panics, as he doesn't want anyone to find out, but luckily things go back to normal. This was a pretty crazy event, so the terrified Grim once again wonders just who the heck Lloyd is. The next morning, Grim gets fed up with doing a bunch of maid duties for Lloyd. He calms down and reminds himself that he must make sure that Lloyd has a clean and healthy lifestyle in preparation for when he takes over his body later. The tear in the sky makes it into the newspaper, but no one knows what caused it. Lloyd might have some serious ADHD, as he has already moved on. He is now more interested in a new story about high-ranking adventurers. They cleared a high-difficulty dungeon and returned with precious treasures and magical items. This sounds super fun to Lloyd, so he decides to go to a dungeon. Grim points out that Lloyd will cause a mass panic if it's found out that he's gone, but Lloyd reveals that he has a solution. Grim is then confused when Lloyd brings out an acorn. His confusion turns into amazement when Lloyd uses it to create a wooden replica of himself. It's actually a pretty complex replica, as Lloyd gave it nerves, among other things. That way, it not only looks like him, but it can also do simple movements on its own. This still isn't enough, as Lloyd points out that he would have done this sooner if it was sure to work. Unfortunately, it is not, since the real problem is Silver. A look back shows just how much he obsesses over Lloyd, as she noticed that he grew 1/4 of a millimeter taller. This silly dancing dummy he just created won't be enough to fool her. But Lloyd has a new solution for that too. He heads outside, and we see that he left Grim in control of the replica while still being able to communicate with him through his hand. The maids adore how cute he is, but Grim thinks about how crazy Lloyd is. Lloyd transferred Grim's soul into the replica and incorporated his soul and body into his hand. Lloyd leaves the rest to Grim, and Grim admires how real the replica feels. Soon he realizes that Lloyd isn't there to stop him, and he gets some devious ideas in his mind. Just then, Lloyd tells him that he really enjoys having Grim as his familiar, and this brings tears to his eyes. Lloyd wonders if something is wrong, but Grim just tells him to just hurry up and finish with the dungeon. Lloyd realizes that he doesn't know where to find a dungeon, and Grim notices that it looks like someone is being attacked nearby. This isn't the case, as the seemingly helpless girl turns on her pursuers and absolutely destroys them. She demonstrates her amazing fighting abilities, and Grim points out that she must be a martial artist. Lloyd has read about the breathing technique she is using. It allows a person to put an energy called a ki into their body, granting them extreme strength. The girl is able to spot them somehow, but that's okay with Lloyd since he wants to learn more about her technique. He begins to panic when Grim points out that she might recognize him as the 7th prince. His silence makes the girls think that he's an enemy, so the guys panic as he makes his way to them. Luckily, Lloyd manages to change his appearance just in time and introduces himself as Roberto. Lloyd used the spell that allows him to transform into someone he has seen before. He used the newly learned dual incantation to combine his appearance with Albert's to create an original look. The girl introduces herself as Dao, and Lloyd worries that she might suspect something since she isn't turning around. It turns out that Dao is actually panicking because she thinks Roberto is a hottie. Dao has spent all 18 years of her life training. She eventually escaped the dojo and became an adventurer in search of romance. Unfortunately for her, this hasn't worked out since. Most guys prefer frail priestesses. Her time has finally come, so she vows to make Roberto her boyfriend. She looks pretty busy, so Lloyd decides not to ask her to clear a dungeon with him, but she jumps at the chance. When they enter a dungeon, Dao is eager to show him her fighting prowess, but our boy Lloyd is too busy obsessing over some glowing rocks. Dao is impressed by how much Lloyd knows about her breathing technique, and she explains that learning about ki begins and ends with breathing. Proper breathing fills your whole body with keys, and it allows a person to release the bursts of superhuman strength. The problem is that it takes a lot of training to even start sensing the ki in one's body. That is why Dao recommends that Roberto spend his time finding the key to her heart. Instead, Lloyd completely ignores the corny joke, and he shocks Dao. When he's able to use a breathing technique, he explains that he just copied her, but she warns that if he's not used to it, he will feel like his lungs are burning. Lloyd is just as crazy as always, and just keeps doing the technique. He surprises himself when he's able to feel the energy inside of him, and he becomes excited when he realizes that he will be able to apply this power to sorcery. Dao decides that she will help him learn about ki and instructs him not to stop the breathing technique until they leave the dungeon back home. Grim thinks Lloyd is crazy because he has such a comfortable life, but he doesn't care for it. All he cares about is learning more about sorcery. Things are going pretty smoothly for Grim, but he is shocked when Sofa makes an appearance. Back in the dungeon, Dao chose Roberto, a ki blast, and used it to defeat the dungeon boss. They are rewarded with a chest, but Dao explains that a dungeon that hasn't grown much won't have any good loot. As they look at the chest, Dao is amazed to see that Roberto has already learned the key breathing technique in such a short period of time. Dao realizes that she just hit the jackpot. If she can manage to get Roberto into a student-teacher affair, then her caretaker will have no choice but to accept him as her fiancé. Dao goes to open the chest, but Lloyd must rescue her as it has a deadly trap. A lich emerges from the chest, and Lloyd wonders if this is the real boss of the dungeon. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about I was reincarnated as the 7th prince so I can take my time perfecting my magical ability by liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving a comment.